school. Certain days I would try, and then I would still be at work, and things just kept coming up. But I was able to watch from afar, which is good.
Amen.
It's very good that we do have this ministry where we can have this broadcast online. It's very nice. Let's bow our heads now and try to get started. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for your many blessings. We thank you for the opportunity to come and study with you or before you unmolested. We ask now, Father, that you would allow us to share the things that you revealed to us throughout the week, so that we all might be edified. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. What is the title of this week's lesson?
Mission to the needy.
Mission to the needy. Now, this is obviously, and a lot of times the lesson is not always as pertinent to the things that we're going through, but this is certainly a lesson that is always pertinent, because there's always going to be needy people. So let's take a look at this. And again, we're following the lesson plan for the quarter, our mission to the world, God's mission and our place in promoting that mission in the world. So this week, again, we're talking about a mission to the needy. Our memory text is what? Can someone read that for us?
And
the king answered, and the king will answer and say to them, assuredly, I say to you, inasmuch as you have done it to one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it to me.
All right. This, again, we will touch on that a little bit more closely as we move through the lesson. Got a little bit of feedback. So let's move right into Sunday's lesson, and we're going to look at a few examples and different ways, again, throughout the lesson, that we can be ambassadors for God and serve the needy in our communities and in the world at large. Sunday's lesson is entitled Faith of Friends. Again, talking about taking care of the needy. And someone turn for us to Luke chapter 5 and read for us verses 17 through 26, because that's where this portion of our lesson comes from. Sunday's lesson, Luke chapter 5, verses 17 through 26.
And it came to pass on a certain day, as he was teaching, there were Pharisees and doctors of law sitting by, which were come out of every town of Galilee and Judah and Jerusalem, and the power of the Lord was present to heal them. And behold, men brought in a bed a man which was taken with palsy, and he sought means to bring him in, and to lay him before him. And when they could not find by what way they might bring him in, because of the multitude, they went upon the housetop, and let him down through the ceiling with his couch into the midst before Jesus. And when he saw their faith, he said unto him, Man, thy sins are forgiven thee. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this which speaketh blasphemy? Who can forgive sin but God alone? And when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered and said unto them, What reason ye in your heart? Rather it's easy to say, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Rise up and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man has power upon earth to forgive sin, and said unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, arise, and take up thy couch, and go into thy home. And immediately he rose up before them, and took up, whereupon he laid, and departed into his own house, glorifying God. And they were all amazed, and they were glorified God, and were filled with fear, saying, We have seen strange things today.
Okay. Sounded like maybe the mic kind of cut out a little bit, so I'll paraphrase what we just read. Basically, this is a situation, again, where Jesus is in a place, and as is often the case with Jesus, he's thronged. There are crowds around him. And he happens to be in a house at this time. So apparently, and also it looks here as though, again, Jesus' fame had spread, and there were teachers and lawyers that had made special trips from all around the country just to come and listen. Now, I can't speak specifically to their hearts, but I can say with a pretty good degree of certainty that many of them were there just to try to find fault. Some were there maybe to learn. I'm sure there were some that were in that case, but there were also others who were really there to find fault, find some way they can trip up Jesus in his words or something that he had done. But the fact was, many of them were there, as well as a throng of other people. So Jesus is in the house, and we have a paralytic. Well, the idea of sick of the palsy meant the man was unable to move. He was paralyzed. And there are many different illnesses that can cause that. I mean, we see them today, and we can treat them a little better. But there are a lot of things that can cause you to be paralyzed. I mean, obviously injuries, but then there are different nervous diseases that can cause you to be unable to move. And the plight of those individuals is very bad. It's very severe. Most of them don't survive for very long. Now, we have certain ways. We've got antibiotics now. But in order for a person to survive, they're very easy to develop. It's very easy for them to develop pressure ulcers and different things that lead to their demise. So the plight of someone who is paralyzed is dire. That is a very poor position to be in. So this man was sick of the palsy, which basically meant he was unable to move on his own. We don't know exactly the extent, whether he was completely paralyzed or just not to the point where he was able to get up and get around well. Whatever it may be, he's being brought to Jesus. Now, as we've mentioned, he's being brought by men, friends. People are bringing him to Jesus. And they arrive, and because, if you can imagine carrying a person on a hammock, that's not something that's very easily maneuverable. It's hard to get around with that. Just a stretcher down the hallway in the hospital, I mean, you're banging into stuff all the time. So the idea that these men are carrying him on a blanket or something like that, some makeshift thing to get him to Jesus, makes it clear that it makes it easy for us to understand how it would be difficult to navigate through a crowd. Especially a crowd where there's a doorway, you're trying to get people are thronging. There's no easy way to get him before Jesus. So what do these men do? Because many times we get to a place and I'll tell you what, I'll get to Walmart or to Costco, I'll look at the parking lot and nope, I'll come another day because it's too crowded. You look at it and you're like, okay, no. It's not worth it. What did these guys do? What was there? They get there. First of all, it wasn't easy to get there. They get there. It's thronging. It's crowded. They can't get the door. What was there? What did they do?
Well, these men were so eager to get their friend to see Jesus, and because the crowd was so thick, they were figuring in what way can we get to Jesus. And people wouldn't say, you cannot say, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. People wouldn't give you room because they themselves want to get to him too. So it was really, you could understand it's really difficult. But with their perseverance and with the help of the Lord, they were able to get through, climb the roof, uncover the roof, and let him down.
Okay, so they couldn't get through the door. And as you mentioned, you're right, they weren't the only needy people there, right? Pretty much anybody other than those looking to find fault were needy too. And they're trying to get to Jesus. So to move them out of the way is not going to be a very easy thing. So they got innovative. So they climbed up on the roof with this guy. Again, that probably was not an easy task either to get him up there. They climbed up on the roof, found out where Jesus was logistically in the house, tore up the roof above him, and lowered the man down in front of Jesus. Now, that takes a lot of perseverance and a bit of daring, because they tore up somebody else's house. That wasn't their house. They are willing, but that speaks to their determination. You see, that gives us some indication of where our mindset should be when we're looking to help other people. When we're looking to help the needy, our mindset needs to be focused on the fact that I need to do whatever I can to get this person to Jesus, or to help this person. Now, getting them to Jesus, their main goal really was to get their friend helped, right? You know, that was the main thing. Yeah, they were bringing him to Jesus, but that was because Jesus was the only thing that could help them. So we have to, first of all, obviously, sometimes we approach our missions, the things that we try to do, and we get ahead of ourselves. We start thinking, I need to bring this person to Christ, when really what we need to start out with is, I need to help this person. I need to do what I can to help them. And ultimately, obviously, we know that all help comes from the Lord. But there are things that we can do first off. First off, again, they were daring. They weren't willing to say no. They looked, saw that wasn't going to work. They found another way. That wasn't as easy as the initial way, right? So even though it got harder every time, yeah, it was hard to navigate a crowd, but it's harder to take him up on a roof, tear up the roof, and put him down to the thing. The point is, their mind, their focus was, I have to help my friend. So that gives us an indication of some of the things we can do. When I said once before that when you love a person, it's different. The way you approach that person and the things you're willing to do are different when you love them. You're not much less likely to try to judge. You're going to try to find a way to be merciful to that person when you love them, right? When you love them, when you love a person, you'll go to greater lengths. And that's why we need to cultivate the attitude of love within ourselves first, and that will allow us to be willing to do these things. Or let me rephrase that. Allow God to cultivate the spirit of love within us. Then we'd be more willing to do this. So these men go through jump through all these hoops to get this man before Jesus. And what was Jesus' response?
Will thou be made whole?
Okay. No. We'll get to that one. This was the one where he looks at it. It says that when Jesus saw their faith.
Oh, yeah.
When Jesus saw their faith. Now think about that. Let's pause there for a second. When Jesus saw whose faith? All of their faith. Right? When Jesus saw the collective faith of the group that brought him there, the man, of course, because we have to realize he was getting carried. If he got dropped, that would be problematic, right? That would be a real problem. He's willing to go through, look, take me wherever you got, just get me there if you can. The people are, let's get I know it's in our house, but we got to get you in there. So when Jesus saw the collective faith of the man and his friends, what did he say?
Thy sins be forgiven thee.
Thy sins be forgiven thee. Now think about that. What does that say to us? The idea of Jesus' appreciation for the collective faith. What does that say to you? How would that translate into us today? What do you think? I see people want to say something, but they're not sure yet. We'll go on a little further, let you warm up into the lesson a little bit. But the point is that our efforts matter. Our efforts for other people matter. If the links that you go to help a person out, the Lord considers that in the process of healing that person, right? That's an interesting thought, because a lot of times we think it's only that person, but it's us too. Our prayers, the things that we're willing to do, the efforts we put forth matter in the eyes of God. And the idea and the process of their healing is tied to some degree to our willingness to work. So that was interesting to me, that he took the consideration not only of just the man to be healed, which obviously he had to have his faith, but also the faith of his friends when he healed the man. Now, when Jesus healed him, what did he say? Thy sins be forgiven thee. Now, it's interesting because on the surface, that would appear not to have anything to do with what the issue was, right? The man was paralyzed. What does the idea of his sins being forgiven have to do with him being paralyzed? What do you think? Why would Jesus say that instead of just starting out with what he says in the end, rise up, take up your bed, and go home? Why would he say that? Your sins are forgiven thee. Give you the mic.
That's what he needed most.
Okay. That's what he needed most. Who did? The man. Okay. Were there any others that he might have been directing this towards?
I believe everyone that was around.
Okay. That everyone that was around, again, Jesus is presenting, he's teaching. Every day that he's on this earth, he was teaching lessons, sometimes through parables, sometimes through making a statement that might seem controversial, whereby, though, then he can teach a greater truth. Now, you mentioned the idea that him saying, thy sins be forgiven thee. Someone said that was the greater need. And that, again, is something that we need to touch on as well, or at least think about, is that oftentimes we look at our current circumstances and don't recognize that there is something deeper that may be causing our circumstances or needs to be fixed first, right? There are priorities within in our lives and the way that the Lord looks to change and save us. So that there are sometimes things that may not be apparent to the outside world that are more important that God needs to take care of first. So we can't see the man's sins, right? We don't know what this person has done or what guilt is plaguing him or what may have led him into these circumstances, but Jesus knew. So it was more important that he say to this man, thy sins be forgiven thee, than he say to him, get up and walk. Because that was more important. Now, that raised the eyebrows of a few people there, right? I mean, we mentioned at the beginning that many of the teachers from all around had come to this gathering to listen to the words of Jesus, and as we mentioned, also some arrived really just to be critical. Find some way they can find faults. Find something that, is wrong with the way that this man is teaching. Now, that hasn't changed, right? There's always going to be somebody that's going to be critical, especially when you're doing something good, right? When you're trying to minister, to do something good, there's always going to be somebody who is going to try to be critical, try to find some fault in what you're doing. I mean, you're feeding the folks, they say, why are you feeding them meat? They're going to find something that they're going to be critical about, and we have to recognize we cannot allow that to discourage us, because sometimes we do, right? We allow things around us to discourage us, the people finding fault. Well, we can't allow that. Jesus says that and says, thy sins are forgiven you, and what is the mumbling that goes on in the crowd? What are they saying when he says that?
No one can forgive sins but God.
Okay, so those teachers and those that came there said, whoa, what's this guy talking about? thy sins be forgiven you. Nobody can forgive sins but God. Now, what is Jesus' response to that? What did he say?
Basically, what he's saying is, I am God.
Well,
Therefore, I can.
right. Well, that was the summation of what it came up to. But he asked him a question. He said, what's easier to say? What's it easier to say for me? Thy sins be forgiven you? Or rise, get up, and take your bed and walk? Right? It's anybody can say your sins are forgiven. And do you know whether the sins are forgiven or not? No. Only God would know that. But for me to say, get up and walk, if there's nothing changes there, that's easy to see. You know, it's easy to see, okay, that didn't work. So he says to them, I could say that, but so that you realize that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sin, he said, then rise, take up your bed, and walk. And what happens?
Walks.
Gets up. He gets up. Now, here's the thing, too, that medically, a lot of times, sometimes the more you know, the more questions you have. But for me, a lot of times, though, it's not really contradictory. It's just more amazing that it worked. Because when you're in a situation of being paralyzed, it does not take long for your muscles to do what they call atrophy. And what that is they shrink.
Yes.
When there's a part of your body that's not being used, our body conserves energy by taking away the nourishment to that. If you're not using your legs, okay, well, you don't need that. We're going to stop sending nutrients there, and your muscles and legs and begin to shrink. And when that happens, your ligaments get tight, and and you've seen people who have been paralyzed for a long time, how that they can be somewhat disfigured and drawn up. That's because of atrophy. That's what happens. Well, this man had been paralyzed for a while. So when Jesus says, rise, get up, and walk, that's no small task. First of all, it requires that all that atrophic muscle be revived. And the other thing besides that, all those ligaments that were tight and had become calcified and solidified have to loosen up. And not only that, if you don't walk for a long time, that's a complex motion. That requires a lot of nervous coordination in order to do that. So if you don't do it for a long time, it's not like you can just pop up and go. This man, what? Popped up and went. Okay? He popped up and went. So that is explains or allows us to recognize that many of the things that we fire or feel as though are hindrances or things that will prevent us because of our experience don't apply. Those don't apply with God because that's not part of he can move past that. He goes past all the rehab and now the guy's on his way, right? He didn't have to go through rehab. So that's what we see. Now, the bottom line for this lesson was the faith of this man's friends. We don't want to get too far from that. The idea that even we have to be innovative in our approach and relentless in our approach to bringing people to helping people. We have to be relentless. And when something doesn't work, try something else. And figure out a way that we can help people, and by that, get them to Jesus. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to talk about on Sunday's lesson before we move to Monday's? I'd like to welcome at this point any of our online participants. I'm not sure whether or not we're able, if you're able to hear. I'd like to, if you can, at some point, just to chime in, just so that I know that everyone that's online can actually hear. If not, let's move on to Monday's lesson, where it talks about Christ methods alone. We'll start with John chapter 5. and we'll go through verses 1 through 9. I'll read that. John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9, and said, "After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there was at Jerusalem by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these laid a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the waters. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the waters. Whoever then was first at the troubling of the waters stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there, which had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie, and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he saith unto him, Wilt thou be made whole? The impotent man answered him, Sir, I have no man, when the water is troubled, to put me into the pool. But while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said unto him, Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made whole, and took up his bed and walked. And on the same day was the Sabbath." All right, let's get a little bit backdrop as to what's going on. Jesus is going down to a feast in Jerusalem, right? Was this the feast place? No. This wasn't where the feast was. Now, he had gone down there for a feast, but while he gets to Jerusalem, where does he go?
Goes to where the poor, sick, maimed, everywhere. Mingles among them.
So Jesus went for something else, but when he gets there, he goes down to where all the sick people are, right? What does that say to us? We need to be doing that. If there are people that need to be helped. Now, Jesus, when he got there, again, a lot of times he's thronged. This didn't seem to be the case today. So if people aren't coming to him, he's going to them, right? Again, that's an example for us. You know, a lot of times we need to find ourselves where people that need help are. If I'm not doing nothing, okay, I'll go down to the mission, see what's going on, you know. So again, that's what we see from Jesus initially. So when he gets there, he finds someone that had been there for a long time. How long did it say he was there? 38 years. 38 years. Now, we mentioned earlier what happens to your body when it atrophies, right? And you can imagine, after 38 years of being unable to move, what this man looked like, right? So Jesus comes to him and asks him a question that, again, his last answer on the surface seemed weird. Thy sins be forgiven thee when he, what does that have to do with anything? So he comes and asks this man another question that seems on the surface, wait, what? What was the question that Jesus asks? Do you want to be whole?
Be made whole?
And on the surface, you're like, what? I mean, this man's been, why would you ask that? And the man goes into an explanation, right? He's like, look, I don't have it. I've been here for 38 years. I can't move. And I don't have anybody to help me. So that whenever the water is troubled, by the time I can wiggle my way over there, somebody else has already gotten in. Now, think about this man's plight for a second. He had nobody. 38 years this man's been laying on the deck of this pool with nobody to help him. Sometimes we gloss over that, but there are people that have nobody. You know, sometimes it's hard, it's almost emotional for me to imagine you got nobody. by himself in the state that he was in. So every day he woke up, it was the same thing. Lay here and hope against hope. In fact, after 38 years, how much hope do you think this man had? You know, so not a lot, right? Not a lot of hope in this individual. So Jesus comes and asks him that question. Now, someone explain to me what you think, or why do you think Jesus would ask that question? What do you think was going on there?
I think many times other people need to witness to us so that we can know what their condition or their need is.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else? What do you think?
Also, I think it's because he knew the guy's hope was really, really low, and so he asked him that question.
Okay. All right. It's easy. You know, remember, it's without faith, the Bible tells us it's impossible to believe or to please God, right? And again, what prompted the healing of the man prior, the one that was lifted down to Jesus, was when Jesus what? Saw their faith. So this man may have lost all hope, right? Now, when someone comes to him and says, do you want to be made whole? Now he goes through his little explanation. Things change a little bit. Wait, what do you mean? Why? Okay, I mean, do you know something I don't? Is there something I can do that, you know, can change these circumstances of mine? I think many times, you know, this passage was misunderstood. Jesus wasn't asking the man, do you want to be whole, because he thought that he didn't want to be. You know, because some people would say, well, dude, you've been here that long and you still ain't healed? Do we do that? We see people in circumstances and like, man, you've been doing this for that long and you still in that situation? That's the outside judgment that many people get. And that's the outside judgment this man assumed, right? When he went into his explanation, he assumed Jesus was saying to him, why have you been here this long? You must not want to be healed. You must not want to get any better. That was the man's assumption. And again, that type of judgment happens now. We look at people, don't we, and say, well, they don't even want to get no better. They don't want to do better. Or else by now they would have done something. That man had felt that type of judgment. Otherwise, why would he respond in the way that he did? But what Jesus was asking him was just straight up. You want me to heal you? You know, do you want me to be healed? Want me to heal you? And then, without allowing the man to answer yes or no, he said what? Well, this was the one where he just says, go ahead. Arise and take up your bed and walk. So, again, we talked about the situation, what's involved in that, as far as getting up and walking. I had 12 weeks of rehab when I just messed my knee up. You know, I tore one tendon in my knee. Took me 12 weeks to get right. Well, that's after they took to keep the bandages off. So you're talking 3 months. 3 months of rehab and trying to do. This man had been atrophied and in his bed for 38 years. Popped up and was out the door. What type of a miracle? That's huge. A huge miracle took place. Let's look at, again, another thing that they talk about in Monday's lesson. We're talking about Christ's methods alone. It talks about the man with the unclean spirit, who that Jesus cast out in the temple. Now, the thing that I think is most important on Monday's lesson, we'll kind of go down through what Christ's methods were. The lesson kind of breaks that down. And again, we mentioned that Jesus went to Jerusalem not to get this, to heal this dude. That wasn't his primary reason for going there, but because he got there and whatever the feast wasn't there, he made sure he went to where the sick people were. The lesson brings out, with Christ's message, the first thing was to mingle with those that needed his help. To mingle with helpless. That's what we need to do. Now again, we need to find out where the people are. Where are the people that need help? And that's where we need to go. Number one. Number two, we need to show sympathy. It needs to matter to us. You know, we live in a world that's hustle, bustle. Everybody's got stuff to do, right? We got a job, we've got bills, we've got places we've got to go. But we've got to be able to let that go and show sympathy on those who need. Because a lot of times, we feel like we need. And the idea of, sometimes it's hard for us to break out of that idea that I need stuff until we see people who really need stuff, right? When we get around the needy, then that a lot of times changes our perspective. So once we get there, we need to be sympathetic, not judgmental, right? Because as we went through this portion, we saw that these people deal with that all the time. The man had been there 38 years. He had dealt with the judgment of others. That's not our job. Our job is to be sympathetic, to go down and see what we can do. Number three, to minister to their needs. Now, what does that mean? Minister to their needs. Seems simple. But many times we will go with our preconceived ideas of what I'm going to do. Right? I'm going to go down to the shelter with turkeys. Nothing wrong with that. But what you have to recognize is they may not need turkeys. Right? They may not need a turkey. Your thought was good, but that's not what they need. So when we go down there, number three, it says, minister to their needs. Find out what it is that you need. It's easy for me to give you what I want to give you, but it doesn't require anything, really any thought or investment in a person to give them what I want to give them. But what requires an investment is to find out what you need and give you that. Okay? Number four, winning their confidence. Again, we're talking about Christ's methods alone. Winning their confidence. Now, what does that mean? What does it mean to win someone's confidence? What is that? Okay. To befriend them. What else?
Of course. Spend time with them.
Okay. Now that's a way to try to win their confidence. But what does it mean to win someone's confidence? Go ahead. We weren't able to hear you. Okay. What does it mean to win someone's confidence?
We will be more open to listen to them.
Okay.
And when we are open to listen to them, we will hear what they need, so we'll be able to help them.
Okay. Again, that's a means of getting to the point, but what does that mean to win someone's confidence? Not how. What does that mean? What is it to win? What does that mean to win someone's confidence? They trust you. They trust you. Now, all the things that you mentioned get us to that point, right? If you're honest with a person, if you help them out, if you go and are truthful with them and are there for them, they start to trust you, right? That's our end goal, and there are many ways whereby we might get there. A few of them that you've mentioned, but that's got to be our goal. And a lot of times, you've got to figure out what it is that will gain that person's trust. Because you got to remember, people, in this world, people take advantage of you. That's just the fact. You know, we talked about it earlier in one lesson where the course of this world, part of the course of this world is people lie to you, people look to take advantage of you, especially when you're in a position of vulnerability, which many of these people are. So you've got to figure out what it is that will win that person's confidence. Like I said, it may not be bringing them turkeys. That's great. Don't get me wrong. But that may not win that person's confidence because they may be in their mind saying, I've seen that before, right? I've seen that before, and I was burned by that. So we have to, again, much of this requires a personal engagement with people. You have to really figure out what is it that you need. Give it without, without asking anything in return. And once you've gained their confidence, they trust you, the final thing is lead them to Christ, right? Because a lot of times we want to start with that. And again, a person that's been in a vulnerable situation, they've heard that before, right? They've seen a lot of people passing out tracts. Again, nothing wrong with passing out tracts. In fact, that's a good thing. But it's got to go beyond that. You know, it's got to get deeper than that. If we're going to really act as though we're moving out to try to win people for Christ and to help people. If that's what we want to do, it's going to take more than passing out a tract. So Monday's lesson talks about those things, and we'll look at that a little closer later as we go through the lesson, maybe try to get back to it just to reiterate the importance of that. But let's move on to Tuesday's lesson because we're losing time here pretty quickly. And I wanted to kind of touch on this one. Tuesday's lesson talks about, again, in the context of our mission to the world, refugees and immigrants. That's the title of Tuesday's lesson. Now, what is, again, this is a very simple question, but just to kind of give us a little backdrop, what do you consider a refugee and an immigrant? And is there a difference between the two? What is a refugee?
I think a refugee is someone who's running from danger,
Okay,
where an immigrant is someone who just wants to move to a new place.
okay. Generally, you guys have heard of Sir Isaac Newton, right? He's considered by almost everybody one of the greatest scientific thinkers in the world. He has a law that involves motion. It's referred to as a law, but his first law of motion is objects in motion tend to stay in motion, and objects at rest tend to stay at rest unless a force acts upon them. That applies to me with regard to moving around. Leaving to move, I do not want to move. I cannot stand it. I will stay in my house until I have to leave. I'll stay in an area until you make me go, because I just do not like the process of uprooting everything and leaving. Loading it up, all that is just, there is nothing about it I like. I can't think of anything. Some people, there's a new, nothing is worth this. So to think of what a person would have to be going through to be willing to leave everything and go to a country, many times, that they don't even speak the language, with nothing. What do their circumstances have to be? Right? Many times we look at the whole immigration problem as a political thing, but we lose sight of the fact, Lord, why would you think these people want to be here? You think they want to go through all that? With little kids? Have you ever taken a kid to the mall? You talking about traveling miles with toddlers because you just want to? The circumstances for these individuals are extremely dire. The other thing, and so it's oftentimes it's difficult for me to watch and see some of the people who talk about this immigration problem and refer to themselves as Christians, right? That's tough. You know, you're talking about getting a bad name. Jesus was a refugee. I mean, in every sense of the word. They were looking to kill him, so he told Joseph, got the message one night. They got up that night with whatever they got and went into Egypt. So we look at this circumstance. We look at these circumstances, and a lot of times we're detached because, like I said, I don't have to move. You know, I don't have to go anywhere. I don't have to do anything. And, you know, it's hard for us to recognize the hardship that would cause. And because of that, we talk about being sympathetic. And it's one thing to be sympathetic and empathetic with things that we can relate to. But it's difficult for us sometimes when we can't relate to it. Now, we hopefully will never personally have to relate to it. However, if we love Jesus, if we love him, and we recognize he had to go through that situation. Now, look at the story. I'll just paraphrase it a little bit. They had to get up that night and flee because he was running for his life. Not long after that, Herod sent soldiers in and they killed every kid in the city from 2 years old and down. That's the kind of situation they were running from. This man was going to great lengths to kill him. They go down there, they stay for a while, and even when they came back, Joseph had to maneuver and figure out, okay, where are we going to go? I mean, because you've been gone for years. You come back into the country, and he's like, okay, we can't go there. Well, we could go, but his son's now ruling, so I don't really think we need to go there. Who knows what might happen? And so then they finally settle upon Nazareth. Don't know nobody. It's not like they've had family there. So we have to recognize that if we're going to call ourselves Christians, if we claim that we love Jesus and we follow his example, and he is our king, and he was a refugee, how are we going to hate him? How are we going to have issues with people trying to escape dire circumstances? Because like I said, nobody's traveling like that just because they feel like it. You know, many people travel hundreds of miles with kids, walking, or worse, trying to get over with, you know, people who say, I'll take you over, and then who knows what they do. So the point is, we cannot call ourselves Christians without having some sympathy in this regard. Now, let's turn to, it's interesting because before I go too far, I don't want to get too far off the point, but God instituted in his government of Israel ways whereby poor and strangers, is the term that they would use, were cared for, just without anybody really making any real effort. There were laws that he set in place. And I think that oftentimes we don't pay attention to that enough. What God's feelings were for poor, what his feelings were for strangers, widows, fatherless kids. We look at Jesus and we see that, but when you read the Old Testament, a lot of times people don't recognize that was built in. Let's turn to, I'll read it. Leviticus chapter 23 and verse 22. This is an indication of something that was interesting to me. This is God talking to Moses. It says, and when you reap the harvest of your land, okay, thou shalt not make clean riddance of the corners of thy field when thou reapest. Neither shalt thou gather any gleanings of thy harvest. Thou shalt leave them unto the poor and to the strangers. I am the Lord your God. Now, what does that mean? What is he saying here? Now, typically a field is square, right? You make a square field. When you go and you have your machines, they use oxen and whatnot to kind of cut it down. You can't make a 90-degree turn. Okay, you can't do that, especially with a cow. So you had to make a turn, right? It had to be an angle. So it's more like a circle or a square with rounded edges than a square. God said when you do that, all that square part, you leave that alone. You don't harvest that. Just leave it there. Gleanings. You know what gleanings are? What that is? Gleanings are whatever falls. So when you're trying to harvest your crops, you go through, you cut it down, you come back and you pick it up. Some of it falls down. You can't. He says if you're building your sheaves, say for instance wheat, you're making your sheaves, you put them on your thing, some of the stuff falls down. God said you don't pick that up. As you're lifting things up and things are falling off, you just put it on your thing, you go. You leave that on the ground for who? The poor and the strangers. Right? That was built into the law. God set that up because it's almost a fail-safe for many. You don't have to do anything. There was nothing you had to do. You just follow the law, and there was a provision in that for the people that needed it. Because Jesus said himself, you're going to always have poor people. The poor is always there. You're always going to have that. But we have to recognize, and my thought was, and I really didn't come up with an answer, are there any areas in our life and in our dealings where we could institute something like that? Like a fail-safe. I didn't necessarily come up with an answer, but a fail-safe where I can help people just in the natural course of what I do. Just like gleaning the field and not picking up the gleanings, just doing this part of the field and leaving the corners for the poor. Are there things, and I'm just going to leave that for you to think about, are there things in your daily life that require nothing other than you just doing something that would benefit other people, that would benefit the poor, that would benefit someone who's in need? And I'm working on it, but I think there are. I think there are things that throughout the course of our lives that we could do that would be almost a fail-safe such that others would benefit from my excess. And I mean, it may be clothes. You know, instead of I've got so many clothes at my house from my kids that it is just, it's insane. There are so many. Maybe each month or whenever, I can find a way that I take these to a spot where I can't have them piled up anymore. So it's not as if I'm doing anything extra. I'm just getting rid of clothes that would somehow benefit someone else. I believe that there are things, that's just me, but I believe each of us, if we think about it, can find something that in the course of our daily lives, without really any effort, we can do to help the needy. And I think, again, if we do enough of that kind of stuff, that makes us different from most, right? And as Christians, that's what we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be the same as everybody else. Our life should be different, even in the things when we're not trying that hard. God has allowed us to incorporate service in every aspect of our life. Did anyone have anything else about the immigrant or refugee thing that they wanted to share that they looked over in the week? Because it's again, as we read this lesson, each of us has different experiences. And many times we're touched in different ways, and a different aspect of it can be touched on. And if you share that with me, I can say, well, I didn't even think about it like that. But then we all are blessed by it. So no, if there's nothing on Tuesday's lesson, let's move on to Wednesday's lesson. And it talks about to help the hurting. Now, the main text for Wednesday is this one. Let me read that. It says, the Spirit of the Lord, and this is Jesus speaking. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has appointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed. It's interesting. In our world, there are a lot of hurting people, right? You don't have to look far to find people who are oppressed or are hurting or are discouraged. And it goes across every socioeconomic group, every race. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care what race you are. I don't care where you're from. You will find hurting people in that group of people, right? And a lot of times we look at certain groups and say, what are they, like a rich person. I mean, antidepressants is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Multi-billion-dollar. People are depressed when us looking on the outside say, what reason do they have to be depressed? They have everything. Now, those of us who are Christian would recognize that things don't bring you happiness. And a lot of money, I remember when I first started practicing, I just got out of residency, and I had no money. In fact, I was in negative. I owed money. So I didn't have any money, and I got there, and one of the docs said to me, you know what? Money doesn't make you happy. And I knew that. I knew that, but it's weird to hear. You're like, yeah, I guess you're right, but man, my washer hadn't worked for 2 months. I'd be happy if I could get that fixed. But the point is, but it's true. It's true. Yeah, you can get a washer fixed when it breaks down, but does that really make you happy? Not really, because we take for granted everything that's working. So there are so many people that are hurting over such a broad area of socioeconomics and race and different things that all of us can relate to somebody, right? All of us can relate to someone who's hurting. All of us has gone through something that someone is dealing with now. And we can help. We can help. We can, sometimes a person just needs to know it gets better. There are some things that people make permanent solutions to temporary problems. And you don't know exactly what I mean by that. Suicide. People kill themselves over something that's temporary. It wasn't going to be that bad all along, but there was no one there to tell them that. Or that had gone through the same situation to say, you know what, I know exactly what you mean. I know it's bad. I know it feels bad, but it gets better. It gets better because I did the same thing. That saves lives.
I just wanted to, one of the things that I realized when I was going through this lesson is that, I was reminded that our Creator made us so that we are whole when we are in relationship with Him. And so that's where true happiness lies, when we have a relationship with Jesus. Now, sin, however, has fractured that relationship. So even those of us who know Christ and are striving for a closer relationship with Him are affected by sin, and so that fracture still exists. So it's helpful for me to remember that, as you were saying, even if you're rich and you've got all the material things that you could possibly want, you can never be happy until you have a whole relationship with Christ. And because we know that, we can help them, we can help people see that. And oftentimes the only way, or frequently the only way for them to see that and realize it, is if we help them meet some of those temporal needs that is clouding their vision. That's what's
Right.
before them. So that's what they need. And so in that text where Jesus says, I have come to, set the captive free and all of that, is because by moving all of that stuff out the way, then he has clear path to say, I am who you really need.
Yeah. And giving sight to the blind was one of the things I wanted to bring up, because it wasn't just the physical blind that Jesus came to heal, those who physically could not see. It was those who were blinded by just what you're saying. All of these cares, all this thing is blinding me from finding out what it is that I really need. I can't see because I'm too distracted, or all these other things are clouding it. But Jesus came to clear that. Those individuals who were blind either by, the misunderstanding of the law. Many of the lawyers would come to him and ask him questions about that. What must I do to be saved? Man, you've been spending your whole life studying this. Why are you going to ask? How could you not know? The point is, they didn't have clear vision. And Jesus came to do all these things, to open up eyes, to preach the gospel to the poor, just to help all these people that were hurting and suffering in this way. That was his mission. Matthew 25 and verse 34 through 40. I'm going to read that because this is a text I think most of us are familiar with, but I think it's good to reiterate it from time to time. It says, "Then shall the king say," this is talking about God, "unto them on his right hand," Jesus giving a parable of the kingdom of heaven, "Come ye blessed of my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was a hungered, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in, naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, "Lord, when saw we thee hungered and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? And when saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? And when saw we thee sick or in prison and came to thee?" And the king shall answer and say unto them, "Verily I say unto you, insomuch that you have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, you have done it unto me." That's profound, right? That's profound, because we can find so many excuses not to do those things. You can find so many reasons that, okay, you see a person, a stranger, somebody else will help them. Or, someone is sick and in prison, I'll go, well, they'll be okay. I'll see them when they get home. Or, there are all sorts of excuses we can come up with not to do these things. And because we don't find the importance in them. We don't see how important they are, but we see how God thinks about them. You see how important he thinks they are. In other words, he's linking these people's salvation to their doing it or not. Now, most of these, well, not most of, all of these things require much of what we talked about as far as going out to help people. It requires something of us. The first group of men, it required relentless pursuit of getting their friend to Jesus. And, the guy that stayed there for 38 years, it requires something of us. And it's more than, it can't be like a job, right? It can't be like a job because we're not going to do it. You know what I mean? If the reason that I'm doing it is because I have to, I'm going to find a reason why I don't have to go. That's right. Something else can come up more important. It's got to be in us. Right. Like I said, when you love someone, things are different. Yeah, I'll come to, if you're sick at the hospital, I'll be the first one there. Why? Because I love you. That's right. So it's got, all these things have to be moved by our love for others.
I think the challenge to that verse is many times when we read this, we just look at it as this is what we should be doing. But he was specifically talking about talking to people who profess this thing. These are the ones that are supposed to be doing it. He wasn't talking to the world. He wasn't talking to the Gentiles. They're already doing their thing. He was talking to us to say, Lord, I do these things, but we don't have that relationship with him. And I think that that's a very profound thing for me, because it really helps us to understand that there is such a high expectation for us as Christians that we take for granted.
So we've got just a few or a couple minutes left before we have to end, and we'll just end on Thursday's lesson where it talks about greater love. And I think that's basically what we've been getting to the entire time. What is it that prompts us to help the needy? What is it that, because if it's, like I said, if it's a job, we're going to find a reason not to do it. We're going to find any job, you try to find the easiest course through it, right? If you're at work, you're not going to do it the hard way. Of course not. I'm not going to do it the hard way. I'm going to do it the easiest way I can. So if this thing becomes a job, we're looking for shortcuts. This has to be prompted by our love. And then when it's prompted by love, when it's driven by love, we're willing to carry our friend up on the roof, right? Like those 4 men. We're willing. I come to the door, can't get in that way. Oh, I got to try another way. That's a lot harder, but I'm willing to do it. Why? Because I love that person.
I just want to reiterate on what you said. We have to look at people that are hurting as if they are our family. We have to look at them through Christ's eyes. And when you see that individual and that perspective, you can't help but what can I do? Yeah. And so it comes down to that. And I find where I'm working at right now is I love working with the homeless. At least that's what I did when I was in Ohio. And excuse me. Every day I do a walk. I always take 30 minutes and walk somewhere in the area. And right around the corner, Woodward and Grand Boulevard, I believe it is, there's a bus stop. And you will see a huge line of people waiting for the bus. When the bus passes, you have 10, 15 stragglers. And they're just people that are transients. They have different names for them. But every time I'm hello, how are you? I'm saying something. But I'm like, I want to do something. Mm-hmm. And that's how the Lord works with you. He just don't let it go. And so I said, Lord, what can I do? Even if it's just giving a can of sardines and crackers, what can I do? I'm passing them anyway. They're right in my, sphere of influence. I can do something, And so that's the sort of thing that I'm finding. That love, I don't know these men, I have no relationship with them, whatever. But that love, I need to do something because Christ expects me, and it's on my heart. It's on my heart to do something for you. I don't care how small it is. Mm-hmm. That's what we all have to come to at some point. And it could be something else with you. Maybe it's education. You see a child that's needing more tutoring, and God just works it. He works, I think whatever the gift is different in each individual, so where he just pushes you to do that particular thing that he's instilled in you, So I said, Lord, I got to do something. I got to do something, I don't know. Hopefully there's no, what you call it, as far as my job is, but I just feel that I need to do something because it stays with me.
Here's the thing. Part of, I believe, one of the instruments of the devil is to make us think that it's hard to help other people. To make us think that, I can't think of nothing. Make us think that it's hard to help people, that it requires a huge effort on our part to come up with some massive, world-changing kind of intervention, and that's not the case. It's not hard. It really isn't, especially once you get down there. Just go. Like we said, what did Jesus do? He took himself where the people that needed help were. And then when he got there, he found that, okay, this is what they need. And then you do that. And then the next thing so it's not hard for us. It really isn't. We can't allow ourselves to be fooled into that, thinking that what can I do? I can't go down there. I can't start a soup. You don't have to. Just go there. Just get there and see, walk in and say, what can I do? I'm telling you, they'll have something for you, okay? And if you come there regularly, you go there enough, you'll be able to see things that you can implement yourself. Well, it looks like, man, you guys don't have enough, garbage cans out here. There's all this, anything. But as we make ourselves, put ourselves in that circumstance, the Lord will reveal to us what they need. Again, just go.
Yeah, I love these lessons because it teaches me to practice more practical Christianity.
Right.
If I love others, I'll treat people as I want to be treated. And when we help others, we help ourselves as well. Now, because of our sinful carnal nature, we're practically selfish. So when we study these lessons, it does help us to take a look at ourselves. Am I doing these things?
Yeah.
And by the grace of God, ask Him to help us to practice these because we cannot hide.
Yeah.
God knows everything we are doing. He knows what is in our hearts.
All right, so right before we close, I want to touch on one thing you just said, because it's interesting that we use that phrase, practical Christianity. There's no other kind. What other kind? That's all there is. But a lot of, we want to think about theological, things, and the only Christianity there is practical. That's all there is. What are you doing to help people? And that was one of the references they made to Jesus in the, I think it was at the John, where they talked about Jesus, just a dude that said, Jesus Christ went around doing good. That was the phrase. I mean, he did so much more, but what it was just practical. That's all. That's the only Christianity there is. So let's bow our heads. Dear Father in heaven, we thank you again for allowing us again to come together and study your word unmolested. We ask now, Father, that you would open our eyes, allow us to see the things that we can do to help the needy. Allow us to place ourselves in the places that the needy are and that people that need help are. And we recognize, Lord, that that's all over the world. That's everywhere we go, we can come in contact. So again, open our eyes, let us see, give us courage to move forward, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.